across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Yeah, welcome to the home of common sense. Thank you to Julia. Back tomorrow at 10 o'clock. There's a load of stuff to wade through here this afternoon. Are jury trials under threat? This is Sir Brian Levison's reforms proposing to scrap juries for fraud and sexual assault cases, leaving judges and magistrates in charge. Critics warn this move undermines justice and risks chaos in an overstretched magistrates' court system. Your thoughts on that? Is justice safe under this Labour government? Our lines are open. Also this afternoon, is France finally getting firm on small boats? Emmanuel Macron has pledged action to tackle illegal Channel migrant crossing, but has blamed Britain's benefit and work system for increasing levels of immigration. I think, oddly, he's got a point on that particular aspect of this. The pull factor is too great over here. And taxpayers are facing an £800 billion bill as the UK transitions to green energy. With £30 billion annual costs and lost fuel duty from EVs, Reform UK have slammed the policies as Tony Blair warns they are set to fail. Wow, Blair says they are set to fail. Everything you need to know and all the breaking news right here on Talk 0344 499 1000. I reckon you'd be in prime position to comment on this if you've ever served on a jury. I've never been asked to be on a jury. It's never happened, and sometimes I'm pleased about that, knowing how long some of these cases can last, and other times I find it slightly offensive that no one has ever thought, let's get that smart old legal brain as part of the 12. Never happened. I've been in court a number of times, however. I've been there mostly as a court reporter back in the day. I've been a witness, and I once stood up in the dock as well as the person who was it's a long story, another time, accused. Nothing bad, by the way, just think parking tickets and stuff. Nonetheless, that's where we're at. And this system at the moment is clearly up for discussion. We know that thousands of cases that would normally be heard in front of a jury should be decided by judges alone. I mean, just on that point, how comfortable are you with that? This is according to recommendations made by Sir Brian Levison. He's for those who don't know, former, very well-respected former senior judge. He was asked by the Lord Chancellor to come up with a load of proposals that were likely to reduce the backlog of cases in criminal courts. Let me remind you, and these are the figures just for England and Wales, there are almost 77,000 cases waiting trial in the Crown Court. Some defendants and victims waiting for over a year for justice. Sir Brian said it's well recognised that justice delayed is justice denied, but the record and rising court backlog means that victims, witnesses and defendants are waiting months, sometimes years, for cases to come to trial. It's not unusual if you see something happen today that you'll read that the case is penciled in for 2029. He says the situation is simply unacceptable. The recommendations I put forward represent a cohesive package of reforms designed to transform our courts into a system that provides appropriate and fair decision-making. He says it also takes a proportionate approach to the trial process while maintaining the fundamental right to a fair trial. So you still get a trial, you might not get one with a jury there. These are not small tweaks, he said, but fundamental changes that will seek to make the system fit for the 21st century. That doesn't change the fact, whatever you think of Mr. Len, I'm sure it's you're asked to solve a problem that's got 77,000 cases waiting. It's going to mean offences with a maximum custodial sentence of 2 years or less. That could be possession of drugs, bike theft, voyeurism, could face lower penalties of 12 months imprisonment or less. Defendants in cases for offences including assault of an emergency worker, stalking, possession of indecent photograph of a child would no longer be able to choose a jury trial. Now, I know there's a lot of cases out there. We saw this with Southport, where, as it turned out, that we know what the correct result of that case was. But prior to that, people's argument on social media was, well, it's quite clear, isn't it? If you catch somebody holding the weapon and they're there, then they did it. All the usual rules about what you can and cannot say surrounding a court case go out the window. If somebody pleads guilty, there might not be well, there certainly won't be a fuller case. Of course, some say that denies people justice, but at least they've pled guilty, etc. But a jury trial is a very specific thing, and there's very good reason why it's there, and it's a very rich and I think very attractive form of getting justice. It's not always perfect, and of course judges can advise and even steer juries. I don't think they can tell a jury what verdict to come back with unless there is a very specific legal reason why guilty would be fundamentally wrong or flawed. But broadly speaking, 12 men and women sit there judging a fellow human on the evidence that they see in front of them. No big titles, no big names, no experts in the world of law, no connection to the person who's on trial, just a very pure and simple system. And to get rid of that, you do so really at your peril. Because there's good reasons for it. I do understand that there are some cases where, you know, if it looks like and sounds like a duck, etc., then it is. And if someone is caught there in the high street, there they are on CCTV, wielding an axe, threatening to cut people's heads off, then you might say, well, do you need a jury for that? Do you need a jury for that? Is it safe under Labour? Is our justice system safe under this government? 0344 499 1000. We have the political commentator Chloe Dobbs with us in the studio. Chloe, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
Have you ever been on a jury?
I haven't, no. Never been asked.
Would you like to be on a jury?
I think it would be a fun experience, yeah.
I'm told it's fun for the first 3 hours, and then after that you realise, hang on, this is a bit serious.
Yeah.
My mum did it, and I remember her saying, you know, after the first, because my mum came home and go, well, he's guilty, isn't he? I went, we haven't heard the evidence yet, Mum. You've got to listen to the whole thing. And I always remember doing court reporting, sitting listening to some pretty serious cases where you'd hear a prosecutor stand up and make their case as to why this person in the dock was clearly guilty of murder, for example. And you'd sit there and you'd think, he's outlined it so well, it's so compelling. Frankly, I don't know why the defence guy is even here, because there's nothing he could say to counter that. Oh yes, there is, because when the defence lawyer stands up, you go, wow, that's amazing. That is amazing. I'd never thought of that. And of course, it's his job to test the system, not to decide on anything, but to test whether the state can prove a case against a human. And when you look at it like that, that's such a good system. That's how it should be, right?
Yeah, I think that it's an incredible system, and it's not something that we should just throw down the drain lightly. I think that there's a balance to be had here. I do believe in that saying, justice delayed is justice denied, to some degree.
Yeah.
I feel like everyone I've met that has a legal case, even if it's quite a small one, it really just destroys their mental health, and they hate living in this purgatory of just waiting and waiting for their court date or for their trial to actually figure out what is going to happen to their life and to their case. And so I think it can be quite debilitating if you have to wait years and years and years. So I can understand if they think that there are cases going to trial with a jury where it's actually really not that necessary, it's not a super serious case, then maybe there is an argument to be made there. But if it's the case that they're just going to try and, you know, rush their way through this backlog by not giving people the proper, thorough trial with the jury when it is necessary, then that's going to be quite concerning. Well,
let's have a listen to the man in charge of these recommendations. He is former senior High Court Judge Sir Brian Leveson. Here he is speaking on Times Radio this morning.
It is critical for our justice system to deliver justice within a reasonable time and at a proportionate level. Unless we do something radical to address the chronic underfunding of the system over many years, it is simply going to collapse.
And of course, the jury thing it's interesting. I wonder whether there is less of an appetite, though, Chloe, today in some respects. I mentioned social media. And I raise that point because I wonder if it changes perceptions that people have. And you see it all the time. You know, people talk about social media as where the real news is, and all the kind of legacy media, which is a peculiar term, but that phrase, that's all nonsense. The truth is here. And of course, that's anything but the truth. You know, we know the kind of mischief, unchecked sources, supposition, guesswork, conspiracy, you name it. So when people say, and this isn't unreasonable, you know, there's a bloke in the high street being caught with an axe. Why do you need a jury trial to prolong this thing when it's quite clear he did it? He's literally on CCTV trying to hack off somebody's leg outside Boots. He's done it. Don't need a jury.
Yeah, I think that there is an argument to be made there that whether you choose to have a jury or not, if they do change the rules on this, is not necessarily about the severity of the crime, but also how, you know, how questionable the evidence is. If it is something where it's just black and white. We do live in a different age now where we've got CCTV absolutely everywhere we go. I mean, you know, for example, with Axel Rudikabana and Southport, a lot of people said, you know, why are we wasting our time on this? We have everything on CCTV. We know absolutely black and white this guy is the murderer.
The classic case.
That there's no case, that there's an argument to be made on how long of a sentence should he have, should he be there for life? But on the question of did he do it, it's obvious.
Well, that's the other thing, isn't it? The jury system does allow, you know, evidence. I'm sure Mr. Leveson would say under this new proposals it would allow that. Anyway, I sense that the jury system allows the court to hear a more tested version, and it is right that a defender tests the evidence of the Crown. That's, you know, because otherwise we just end up as North Korea, where they say, well, the state says you did it, so you did it. And then the man with an axe goes, yeah, I did. Did you not see what happened? What the CCTV doesn't pick up is just before that happened, this man tried to stab a load of people in a shop. I chased him out because I'd just been to Millets and bought an axe and went for him. That's how his leg... You didn't see that bit. And then you go, oh, right, so he's not actually a mad axe man after all. He's a hero. So it's stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly, and that's why this is such a hard one. It's such a hard call. I mean, for example, the Lucy Letby case, I'm not all over the details, but there are now a lot of questions being raised saying, has there been a miscarriage of justice here? It does happen from time to time, so it's important that cases are not rushed through. But yeah, there has to be a balance somewhere. I don't think that we can have people waiting, you know, potentially up to a decade or something for a trial.
I mean, how many
people, you know, we've got a huge prisons crisis at the moment with being very full, and how many people are sat in prison waiting for a trial? If they had the trial sooner, then they might be out of prison sooner if they were to be found not guilty. I don't know the figures on that, but that's something to consider.
There is a way around this, Chloe, of course, and that's for bad people to stop doing bad things. Then we won't be building up this big backlog of nonsense.
Well, I'm sure after they've heard you say that, no one's ever going to commit a crime again.
As you know, I sit here with a big radar. I can see where every listener is in the land. I've got a little joystick here. I can zone in. I've got a shoplifter in Middlesbrough I'm looking at now. I'm appealing to him in particular. Stop shoplifting, then you won't need a trial, then we won't have this trouble.
If only it was that easy.
Wouldn't it be nice? Let's move to this story, Chloe. Last night, the French president pledged that France will finally adopt a firm approach to illegal immigration. He also stated that the UK needs to stop making it so easy for illegal migrants to build new lives. Let's have a listen to Mr. Macron speaking yesterday.
France and the United Kingdom have a shared responsibility to address irregular migration with humanity, solidarity and firmness. The decisions that we will take at our bilateral summit will respond to our aims for cooperation and tangible results on these major issues. But our objective, very clearly, is to have the best ever cooperation between our two countries in order to fix today what is a burden for our two countries.
Firstly, I didn't realise he spoke that good English, to be honest. You don't very often hear him.
I was struggling to understand his French accent there, to be honest.
Were you really? Yeah. Well, I mean, he spoke. Put it that way. I always thought that, I imagined there was going to be a translator there.
Really?
Yeah.
You're joking, right?
I mean, you can do a bit, can't you, when you're doing a full
Everyone
speech.
Speaks English.
What do you mean everybody?
Have you not been on holiday anywhere? You try and practice your French. Yeah, I remember I spent all those years in school I was best in the class at French, and then I went on the school Paris trip, and everyone I spoke to spoke straight back to me in English. I thought, what's the point?
French was my best subject at school. I hooked onto it. I was fine with it. You go to France, speaking bonjour, and they go, what would you like? So, no, don't do that. Don't do that. I was about to order a croissant and a latte. Never mind. The one thing he's right about, Macron is right, is that the UK needs to remove the pull factor. And on that, he's got a point.
Absolutely, he has a point. I do also take big issue with the fact that the French have taken a lot of our money, and it sounds like are asking for more, and haven't done their side of this job to stop the boats from coming. But he's absolutely right. There are huge pull factors at bringing people to this country. They know they're going to get a nice hotel, and these people coming here, they're not super materialistic, but going somewhere where you know you're going to be fed, you know you're going to have a roof over your head, you know you're never going to be kicked out the country. It's highly unlikely. And also we've got that big pull for Deliveroo and all the other delivery companies. Some good news there is it looks like we are now going to have a crackdown after the big expose by both the Sun and the Express, where we're going to see potentially 60k fines per illegal migrant worker to these companies, and possible even, you know, removal of directors and prison sentences for people running the companies. We'll see if that happens, but that's potentially a good thing that will remove one of the pull factors. But we are way too soft. And it is hard to strike a balance, because if you have no hotels whatsoever, you do still get people coming. It may be a smaller number, but then you end up with these tent cities everywhere, like we see in Park Lane, gangs in the streets, and then you end up putting members of the public in danger. You see this in Italy. You see them all just homeless, hanging out outside the huge station outside Milan. As soon as the sun goes down, it becomes a very dangerous place. The locals don't like that, but because they don't offer them hotels, they all decide, I'm going to climb through the Alps and go to France instead, and maybe have a go at going to Britain or somewhere else, because I might get a roof over my head. So it's hard to strike the balance, but we are way too soft, and Macron does have a point.
By the way, the downside of getting, you know, tough on the delivery people is that my beef chow mein and sweet and sour chicken from Chairman Mao's Rice Emporium the other night took 2.5 hours. Used to take about 30 minutes.
Clearly there aren't enough riders.
So, you know,
clearly,
ups and downs of all of this.
I have to say there seem to be a heck of a lot of delivery riders. So
there's a lot of them.
I mean, it just shocks me how high the demand for it clearly is. How many people are so lazy?
Well, you said you don't do it very often.
No, I never do. Why would you be so lazy not to be willing to walk 10 minutes to walk down the street to go pick something up? I understand if you live in the middle of nowhere and you'd have to get on public transport or get in the car.
So the other day when I ordered food, I was at home with my little boy. I couldn't leave the house. I didn't want much, so I ordered it. And outside my house there's some roadworks at the moment. So I thought, I suddenly realised he's not going to get here. So I walked out the house and I walked partly down the road so I could wave at the man.
Yeah, the time you spend trying to find the person is the time it would have taken you to walk down to the shop and go pick it up yourself.
Just tell us this, Chloe. You did that programme for Channel 4 where you looked at migration, the whole story, you know, through the lens of people who had you know, one opinion of it. Did it change your opinion? That kind of stuff. There were moments in that programme where you guys got to talk to some of those people making that journey. Did you? What would you describe? It's hard to do this, I know. How would you describe the average person that you met who wants to jump on a boat and get to the UK? Who are they?
I would say the vast majority of people that we spoke to were extremely kind. Anyone who's done some travelling to poor countries will recognise the fact that it's sometimes the people with the least who are the kindest and the most generous. You know, we went to people who were basically living in slums and were desperate to try and cook us a meal, even though they had barely any food themselves. But the reality is the people who are willing to speak to you and have an interview are going to be the nicer ones.
True.
And I still very much have my concerns about it will be a small number of them, but a number of them coming across who have bad intentions and who have backward views about women and whatnot, which very much 100%. Concerns me.
And we don't know who they are. We have no idea which ones are which. We don't know.
It is a huge security issue, and after the 20th anniversary of the 7/7 bombings just a couple of days ago, I think a lot of people have looked back and thought, we have learnt nothing. Sure, the people who did those bombings, they didn't come across on the boat, but we are opening ourselves up to something like that happening again. Because who knows? I mean, we've already had those plots foiled by the Iranians and all sorts. And
if you are a terrorist, you only, as they always say, you only have to get lucky once. So we'll talk more to Chloe in a few moments. That question, is justice safe under Labour? Trials by jury could go in many cases. Reduction in sentencing, etc., are the big concerns. Your experience, if you've been on a jury, what did you make of it? Did you need to be there? There's a question that would tie into this. Could it have been done without 12 men and women viewing and listening to the case? Our lines are open, 0344 499 1000.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
This is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
24 minutes after 1 o'clock, Chloe Dobbs is with us. We're looking at the big stories of the day, taking your calls as well. And this one, Wes Streeting has warned junior doctors that the public will not forgive them for launching another wave of disruptive strikes, as he made clear that a pay rise was off the table. Let's have a listen to Wes Streeting.
The BMA's ballot result from resident doctors is in, and it's really disappointing that despite the fact that a majority of resident doctors didn't actually vote for strike action, the BMA are now preparing for strike action. And it's completely unnecessary, not least because since this government came to office, resident doctors have had a pay rise of 28.9%, and this year alone had the highest pay award of the entire public sector.
That was the Health Secretary speaking yesterday. His most recent comments are this. He says, I wrote to the BMA this morning to offer to meet their committee and to work with them to improve the working lives of resident doctors. Instead of talking, they've announced strikes. No trade union in British history has seen its members receive 28.9% pay rise, only to immediately respond with strikes. And the majority of BMA resident doctors didn't even vote to strike. This is completely unreasonable, he says.
Yeah, it is absolutely unreasonable. And I get their point that they say, oh, we need this huge pay rise of, what, 30%, nearly 30%, to restore real-term pay that we had in 2008. But they had the biggest pay rise across the whole public sector when Labour came into power. And Wes Streeting was very happy that he managed to stop those strikes. They also then, this year, I believe, got an extra 5.4% pay rise. So they've seen a really big rise. And I think, yes, they want to be paid well, but also there are patients that are absolutely crying out. There are so many people that are, quite frankly, dying because they can't get the help that they need from the NHS. That waiting list, so they have made progress on bringing the waiting list down, but people aren't feeling it because it's still way higher than pre-pandemic levels. With the pandemic, we pushed back so many operations and appointments. Then we had that big wave of strikes, which made matters even worse. We can't go through this again. The NHS is at breaking point. I think everyone on all sides of the political spectrum will agree. It is a crisis point. This is the last thing that we need. This is going to be very problematic for Wes Streeting, because if he's desperate to press ahead with his NHS 10-year plan, if he's put in a position where if you don't give them a pay rise, they're going to strike, I don't know what he's going to do, because if he does offer them the pay rise so that he can get on with meeting his objectives in the NHS, I mean, first of all, I don't know how on earth he's going to convince Rachel Reeves to give him the money. But
he's not, is he?
But this country's going to go broke, and we know that tax rises are pretty much
on the way.
In the autumn. Are those going to be even worse than we expect if he starts offering a load of cash out to these doctors so that he can continue getting the waiting list down and whatnot in the NHS? But he has offered to, as an alternative, improve the working conditions of doctors.
I think he's acted quite fair on this.
Yeah, I think
I'll meet you for a chin wag.
I think one of the reasons why doctors are so frustrated at the moment is because it's a profession that they might have gone into because they enjoy it, they like helping people, but actually they realise they're in a job that is incredibly stressful and miserable, because they go to work, there aren't enough doctors, everyone's running around like headless chickens. It is chaos, any doctor I speak to. If he can improve the working conditions a bit for them, maybe they'll be happier, but we'll see.
We will see. Just a final one here. Labour facing outrage as activists are putting forward a biological man for a woman's officer job. The group Trans Rights Alliance seemingly forgotten, of course, what the Supreme Court ruled. And this is the upshot, where a transgender woman called Steph Richards is nominated as the Women's Officer for LGBT plus Labour. I mean, there's a number of problems with this. Number one, Steph Richards is not a woman, so there's that. Whilst respecting Steph's right to live however the heck Steph wants to live, that's fine. This is mischief making, isn't it? I mean, if you're putting I don't know what the woman's officer required, but you know, as a biological male, Steph has never had a period, Steph has never suffered sexism, Steph has never, doesn't have a womb, doesn't have all of the things that, you know, you might say are connected, women in the workplace, inequality, blah, 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 the list goes on. Why would you put a non-woman up for a woman's officer job?
Well, I guess it's a group that is called Trans Rights Alliance, so their committee, I mean, what do you expect?
They're just bums, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, but what this really shows, whoever they put in that position, I'm not sure whether it would be in breach of what the Supreme Court has said, because as long as they're doing the right thing when it comes to bathrooms and whatnot, they might be okay in terms of the question of, are they breaking?
But wouldn't you feel like a bit of a...
I'm not backing them up. I think this is absolutely ridiculous that we're at a point.
If they went, right, Steph, we know you were born a bloke, but you live as a woman.
Yeah.
So we'd like to make you the woman's officer. Wouldn't Steph have gone, mate, I don't think I'm the best candidate you've got here?
I mean, I don't know why a group of people that don't know what a woman is would have a woman's officer in a group like this. It just seems like a stupid job to
it's
have
whatever
on your committee.
A woman is whatever they want it to be. That's the thing, isn't it? You can be anything.
I mean,
to call yourself a woman.
You're dealing with a group of people who do not have a sane view of the world. These are people who have no idea what a woman is. So it's no surprise that they've done this. But what this shows is the great fracture in the Labour Party. I think the trans problem has been and continues to be a big issue for them, because there's also another group in the Labour Party called, I think, Labour LGB, which doesn't include the T, which thinks that, you know, they know what a woman is, basically. And so these people are at loggerheads with each other. We saw what happened in the Supreme Court ruling. Starmer freaked out and just went underground for 6 days and didn't say anything because he didn't want to upset either group of people. It's a big problem for them.
Well, my little boy, who's 11, said to me not long ago, am I right in saying, Dad, that there's two genders? And I said, yes, there is. And it's that simple.
Oh, well, it looks like you brought him up well.
It's that simple, right? I mean, it's not hard to get your head around. You don't need the Supreme Court ruling. There might be people who choose to live a different lifestyle. That's fine. We're a democracy. We ain't North Korea, as I always seem to say. So do whatever you like, go nuts. But yeah, there are two genders. Simple as that.
Exactly.
And from one gender to the other, Chloe, good to see you. Thank you for coming in. Chloe Dobbs with us here on the programme. Over to you as well. On that question, is justice safe under Labour? Anything else we've chatted about here, do feel free to join in as well. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This in from Alan, who says, enjoy the show. Love Chloe as your guest as well. Thank you, Alan, for that. He says, you're asking if we trust Labour on the trial system. Most of us don't trust them on anything. Economy, crime, immigration, public services, the list goes on. Totally inept as a party that are clueless on running a bath, let alone a country. Being an older person, I really do fear for the future of our once great country. The sooner this mob are gone, the better. Keep up the good work. Alan, thank you for that. That's a very thorough and totally understandable message as well. You can message 87222 if you want to leave a voice note on anything. 0344 499 1000. We are, of course, focusing. Well, there's so many subjects around this afternoon, but we are going to focus particularly on this one, Labour's proposals to scrap jury trials for serious offences like sexual assault face a backlash, with critics warning it undermines justice and risks chaos in an overstretched magistrates' court. Meanwhile, Lord Lilly calls for Britain to quit the ECHR, accusing it of enabling activist judges to override Parliament. He argues leaving would restore control over asylum, deportations and safeguard British sovereignty. A couple of voices to speak with here. Firstly, let's speak with prison justice campaigner David Shipley, who talks regularly on this stuff and often helps us out with these kind of issues. David, good afternoon to you. I know you've just written a piece in The Spectator on this, a very thorough piece as well. Give us your overview of what you make of this latest report that has come in from former senior judge Justice Leveson.
Sure. The first thing to say that's very important, this isn't yet policy. So Brian Leveson, who obviously did the Leveson inquiry, has done this very detailed piece of work looking at the state of the court system, and now it's up to the government whether they accept it or not. What he's dealing with is that the courts are broken, like the rest of the justice system. You know, even when the government adds thousands of extra sitting days a year, the backlog keeps increasing. Court cases are taking, on average, almost a year to complete, and many are taking much, much longer. And that's appalling for victims. It's also appalling for defendants whose lives are on hold for a very long time. And it's only going to get worse unless they do something. So that's the background here of why they've had to act. What he's recommended, there's 42 recommendations. I won't talk through them all, but essentially he recognises there's no money to magically rebuild the court system. And actually, as that part of the issue is the lack of experienced judges and lawyers. You can't go and buy them off the shelf. They take years to train. So he has to do something now. And what he's proposed essentially is a few things: getting more cases dealt with out of court. So that could be cautions, community resolutions, that sort of thing. Moving certain offences from Crown Court to Magistrates' Court. And creating an intermediate tier, essentially. He called it something else because intermediate courts are a controversial topic, but essentially it's an intermediate court between a magistrate's court and a Crown Court, where you'd have your guilt decided by two magistrates and a district judge. And quite a lot of that, is controversial for people because it's, the right to a trial by jury is obviously a bastion of our freedom.
Do you sense that there are, whether we like it or not, clearly cases where, and we give the obvious example of, someone's in the high street on CCTV, caught from multiple angles, wielding an axe, tries to chop somebody's toes off or whatever, then many would say, look, back in the day, we understand why we had this very seductive and understandable, intellectually understandable position of trial by jury. But there are some cases where you just don't need, it would be ridiculous to have a trial. Why would you waste 8 weeks on something that could be done in 8 minutes?
I think that argument's very appealing. I suppose the state will always say that the trial is a short-run thing and they're certain the person's guilty. And the reason we have trials is when there's a disagreement about that. One quite clever thing that Leveson's proposed in this, actually, is that he's looked at the discount you get for pleading early. So right now, you get about a third off your sentence if you plead guilty at the earliest opportunity in the magistrate's court. He's proposing to increase that to 40%, but actually to take away the automatic right to any discount if you plead guilty once your trial begins. And a lot of people at the moment plead guilty on day one of their trial, often, I suspect, because they're waiting to see if the trial happens or not. So discouraging that sort of behaviour could be helpful. I think if people are guilty, it would help everyone if they plead guilty sooner. Equally, a lot of offences are dealt with by the magistrates' court already, so it's not necessarily a huge issue. I think what might be more controversial is the way he's essentially proposing downgrading the sentences for some crimes quite substantially by making them magistrates' court only, because magistrates can only sentence up to 12 months. So all drug possession he's proposing becomes magistrates only.
Could we not just speed things up, David? I mean, would that not be... I had to sit in on something at a magistrate's court a few months back, and even the solicitor said to me afterwards, you know, he said, literally, I've seen this same... It took about 2.5, 3 hours, the process. This was going through the details and finding court dates and this kind of stuff. And so around about 3 hours of court time, and the solicitor said to me afterwards, he said, I've seen that same process done in about half an hour. And things like that, it's the grinding, slow pace of justice isn't just down to the court case itself. Some of it is down to the system.
That is true, and I think if you ever attend court cases, what's interesting is they're nothing like the TV dramas we might have seen. They're actually very slow, very discursive. People take a long time to talk through topics. People have to look for paperwork. You know, the process is not fast, and I wonder, yes, if better technology, maybe better approaches, better systems might be big improvements as well.
David, thank you for your time. Really appreciate that. David Shipley, his piece is in today's Spectator, a great piece on exactly this. Let's speak with Tyrone Steele, Deputy Legal Director at Justice. Tyrone, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, we're very seduced by the jury system. It's very pure, it's very simple. You don't have lawyers or judges generally sitting in that group of 12. Ordinary people looking at a fellow human being who's accused of doing something wrong, and all the evidence is thrown at you. You've got the defence. It's only right. You know, as I keep saying today, we're not North Korea, so they can test whether the state is trying to stitch you up and test it to the max, which is great. All of that we understand, but is it an era that's over?
Well, so I mean, I think for the reasons that you said in terms of its purity and simplicity are the reasons why it's one of the most trusted parts of our justice system. If you look at any of the polling which talks about juries, the people like them, and people like them for multiple reasons. They know that they're a rigorous form of justice. You know, if you can imagine if you or someone close to you were accused of a crime, you'd very much want to have proper safeguards in place, and juries do provide that. And if you think about the consequences that can happen when you've been convicted of an offence, now the report talks about having this apply for sentences of under 3 years. Now, I'd still argue a 3-year sentence is pretty hefty, and you'd want to make sure that decision's being taken properly. I think one of the other reasons as to why people like juries so much is because they are reflective of society. You know, you get a proper section of society making that decision. And I think it's really important for trusting confidence in our justice system that we make sure that the public are involved in those decisions in the way that they are.
Yeah. And also, of course, a jury isn't there just, it's not just guilty, not guilty. There's circumstance, there's context, there's all sorts of other information that you get throughout the course of a trial. I made this point a little earlier. A number of times when doing court reporting, sitting there listening to, I think the first time I ever went into a court in Maidstone Crown Court, listening to a prosecutor who was prosecuting it was a murder trial. And the case was so beautifully articulated to the court, I thought, well, the defence fellow might as well go home, because there's no way he's going to find an argument against any of this. This bloke's clearly done it. And then, of course, in the afternoon, defence lawyer stands up with the most incredible case. I mean, blew me away with the detail that I hadn't even considered here in the prosecuting case. And I thought there and then, that's why we have this system. This is brilliant, because I was 100% sure this bloke had done it, and then come an hour later, when I heard the other side of the argument, a whole different view. Now, of course, the jury, throughout the course of a trial, will hear that and more besides, different witnesses, different context, different angles, sometimes literally. And, of course, your view could be different. If you take all of that away, or much of that away, then you are left with what would feel to many a sort of poor version of justice. Even if it is a couple of magistrates and a judge that are presiding over the evidence, it would be nothing compared to the fullness of 12 men and women.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, the other one of the excellent elements of jury trials is the fact that it's done in secret, right? So no one knows what goes on in that room. You know, they're protected. They're protected from outside influence. They're able to make that decision to the best of their ability. And that's one of the reasons, again, another one of the reasons why the public have so much confidence in them. Now, I know one of the arguments that's often put forward to removing jury trial rights is around efficiency and it's around cost. And we all know the criminal justice system is in a massive crisis. I think those are the first words of the report. But really, we have to think about, well, how much more expensive it can be to have the wrong results come out of this. So, if you have miscarriage of justice or the wrong decisions being made because we don't have that rigorous system, that can be incredibly expensive. But then even more broadly, public trust and confidence in the system, I think, is a price worth paying for a jury system that works well.
Yeah, but I guess the other side of that, as I was saying to David a second ago, on this, if you do have a case where there's multiple CCTV angles of a mad axe man going nuts in the high street, then many people would look at that and say, well, what is the point in a protracted case that's going to go on forever? There he is, he's caught on CCTV, we saw him come out of his house, we saw him buy the axe, we saw him try to chop someone's toe off, or whatever it happened to be. It's ridiculous to spend tens of thousands, often more, on a long case when some good legal brains would clearly be able to establish he was guilty.
Yeah, well, and I think you can see other recommendations in the report which might help address that issue. So David earlier mentioned the fact that discount amounts are going to go up, so that would incentivize someone to plead guilty earlier on. But I think taking a step back and thinking about some of the cases that might go through or might be affected by these reforms. I was speaking to a lawyer the other day who represented a 93-year-old man who was being prosecuted, complaining. He put up posters complaining about his noisy neighbours. He got an injunction put against him, breached the injunction, he kept complaining, and then the DPS decided to prosecute him. He could have gone to prison for years. Luckily, there was a jury trial there. They looked at that and said, well, that's clearly nonsense, and acquitted he was. So we have to, would we get the same outcome in other circumstances? Again, is that a risk that we really want to take?
Is there almost to go against some of my own words just on this point, Tyrone, is there a problem, though, fundamentally with the jury trial, in the sense that, the defence is there to obviously defend the client and test the evidence of the Crown. And that, when you say that out loud, that sounds great. But when you've got a really good defence lawyer saying to the jury, looking them all in the eye one by one, and, we've all seen some good roostering barristers at work and very impressive stuff. When they say to the jury, can you be, absolutely sure that what you just heard, if you keep saying that enough and you think, wow, I was pretty sure, but now he keeps asking me, I'm not so sure. Is there a sort of fundamental problem there with, are we too generous to the defence in some respects? Have the defence got an easier case or an easier position?
I don't think it's about being generous to the defence. I think it's about being generous to ordinary people, right? So we have in this country the presumption of innocence. If the state accuses you of doing something, then the starting point is that you're innocent unless the state is able to prove that.
True.
Now, I'd argue the state probably has the favour is actually, or the balance is more on the state side, because they have resources, they have the police, they have the prosecutors. Against that one, individual who's under all of that weight. And what juries do is they act as a kind of democratic valve to come in and sense check what the state is trying to do when they're trying to send someone to prison or find them guilty. And I think that's really precious.
Interesting. Just a final one. John in Lincolnshire just messaged us saying, why can't we have a 3-person jury for simple cases? They could spend a week doing multiple cases a day. Quick, fair and simple. Has anyone discussed that, having a sort of slimmed down version of a jury?
Yeah, no, I'd suggest your caller to maybe get in touch with the review team and put the suggestion in that way. They did do a consultation period, so maybe you could put the idea there. But I think one of the advantages of having a larger 12-person jury, or a larger jury in general, is the fact that you do get a proper cross-section of society. So you're getting proper representation from, class background, socioeconomic, gender, etc. So that's what allows us to make sure, and the discussions as well that 12 people can have really makes a difference.
Yeah. I'm sure you probably saw the Channel 4 programme, I think it was called The Jury, when they put up a case where there were 2 juries and neither of them were aware of the other one being there, and they acted out a real case, but with 2 different verdicts, one guilty, one not guilty. So I suppose that I didn't know what to make of that. I didn't know whether that was wow, that's impressive. Look, just goes to show how, human beings are not contaminated by the judge or anyone else. But then there was only one right answer to justice, guilty or not guilty, but they got 2.
I guess you could have the same scenario if you had 2, judges deciding on different cases, they may come up with different outcomes. I think the point is having more people involved in the process makes us a bit more confident that it's going to come to the right decision.
Is there a way just to simplify the whole thing? I mean, we've got 77,000 cases, just England and Wales, you know, awaiting to be heard. We now have people, if you committed a crime tomorrow, you could be told it'll be 2029 when your trial will be here. I mean, this is unacceptable stuff. Is there a kind of, I don't know if there's a sort of golden buzzer of an answer, but is there something that would at least that the judiciary and the legal world mostly agree on that would really speed it up? And people often mention night courts as an obvious one.
I completely agree, and it's unacceptable the amount of waiting that victims are having to do, defendants and the general public as well. That is obviously damaging to public confidence. I think the risk of going down the reducing jury trial route is that you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater, right? Yeah. That's the most trusted part of the system. Why would you put that in jeopardy? Now, in terms of other measures that can be taken to speed things up or to make sure justice is being delivered on time and properly, there's lots of great recommendations in the report that you'll see. Out-of-court disposals, I think, is a good one that David mentioned earlier. I think also as well, going to the example of the 93-year-old man I mentioned, why was his case being prosecuted in the first place? Yeah. Is there more that the CPS can do to make sure it's being smart in terms of the decisions, in terms of the prosecutions that it's taking forward? Indeed. So I think all parts of the system have a responsibility to look at what they're doing. What I'm saying is I'd be really cautious about undermining one of the most kind of trusted parts of the system.
Yeah, bang on. Listen, Tyrone, thank you. Tyrone Steele with us on the programme. He is Deputy Legal Director at Justice. Thank you to him. Over to you, 0344 499 1000. A little bit of breaking news. Plans for Donald Trump's visit to the UK is likely to happen in the coming weeks. Plans being drawn up for that visit. This is a Sky News source suggesting the US president will likely touch down in Scotland to visit his golf courses at the end of July or the beginning of August, and Police Scotland confirming it was preparing for a potential visit later this month. We'll update you as we get it. Back to you right here on Talk, coming next.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This one in from Mark in West Sussex. He says, afternoon, Ian. I've sat on quite a few juries over the years. Most times a not guilty verdict was arrived at due to dubious or bad quality evidence being submitted. Then you discover the previous convictions for the same offence. A judge would be aware of the previous. So it's not a perfect system at the moment. We should not make it worse. So that's a really good point. When, you know, you discover the prosecution put forward some evidence, but it's a bit iffy. It's not made up. It's just very easy for a defence counsel to tear it apart and go, there's nothing in that that would demonstrably prove 100% my client touched it or got near, blah, blah. Until you go not guilty, because we can't be absolutely beyond reasonable doubt. So you find not guilty, and then at the end of it you discover, you know, it's Bob the prolific car thief who's done it for 27 years. And as Mark says, but this is the beauty of this, that the judge already knows that. And I kind of love the fact that the judge, this important person, paid a squillion quid for their troubles. The entire conductor of the court, the authority of the entire system, apart from that room that has 12 ordinary people in it, and he's not allowed to go anywhere near. And that's a kind of nice side of the system, but the broken bit, as Mark points out, is exactly that. But what are you meant to do? You know, do you let a guilty man go free sometimes because of that system? But it also means that non-guilty people are able, mostly, to have a fair trial and are acquitted. Or you'd hope so. Adam's in Nottingham. What do you got for us, Adam? Good afternoon.
Hi, yeah, just from my own experience and own idea of what the human race is, I think it's terrifying taking the jury away from the judge. I don't believe that any one person should be in charge. Yeah. We should have a leader, but never one person. I mean, it terrifies me of Putin and North Korea. He could just walk in a room, push the big red button, whereas we would have to go through a series of parliament and stuff. Should we do this and all that? And they don't really have anything stopping them. And if a judge has it on him that day, you know, he's got into a traffic incident or something and he just ticked off and he wants to take it out on someone, there's nobody there to say, you know, something, that's not, maybe that's not proportionate or whatever. Yeah. But to remove the jury is yes, it's not a perfect system, but to me, it's going backwards. It's, you know, it's some all-powerful guy sitting in a chair deciding somebody's future.
And here's the thing, Adam. We're not. This is the worrying bit. Just to sort of move your point into this, they're not talking about this because they found a better system. They're talking about this because they want to get rid of a backlog.
Yeah, cheap justice is no justice.
Yeah,
and I believe that as well.
Even in cases, Adam, and sometimes, you know, as you say, it's not perfect, and you have to take all of its imperfections with you. So even in cases where it looks as if, like, you know, well, clearly he did it, that person is still entitled to a trial, right?
That person is entitled to a trial. I don't think it needs to be. It's a lot more close cut. I mean, you're on about if you're on a CCTV camera and all that. That's all true for the last 10 years and maybe for the next 5 years. But technology is coming on so thing that somebody can just docked film footage in 5 minutes.
Well, there's a lot of that going on at the moment. There's a couple of one in particular, won't mention it, where you've got people who are happily posting and doing jokes about it, and, you know, and you think, okay, you know, you could argue, well, the footage I'm looking at speaks for itself, so therefore, you know, are you really going to halt a court case by mentioning it? But the worry of that is the drip effect, or the, you know, the frog in the hot pan thing, that will we gradually kind of reduce our expectations of what we want a court to be if we are just sticking stuff on social media and deciding whether someone's guilty or not?
Again, you need more people there deciding. You raised a good point which all these CCTV, what about the 20 minutes before? I think I remember somebody telling me that the police will not entertain dash cam footage unless the people who's reporting the incident can show the 20 minutes before the incident. Because a lot of these people get themselves into this thing by ticking off another driver, and that driver's angry, and then escalate that, and then they only show them the last 5 minutes of this driver hitting them, but not the
not what happened beforehand and all the circumstances that go with it. Listen, great point, Adam. Thank you very much indeed for that. You start us off. Don't go away, Steve. We will be with you shortly. It is interesting, the sort of social media thing. I've had kind of the odd row with people saying, mate, you might not want to put that on social media because you are potentially jeopardising a court case. And some buffoon comes back at you, are you stupid? It's obvious he did it. And I said to this guy, I said, well, so is that how we do it now? So Bob in Arbroath just puts a post up going, yeah, it's obvious he did it, so find him guilty, end of. We don't have any court cases. You wouldn't say that if it was a member of your own family who'd found themselves in that position. And even if it is pretty obvious somebody might have done it, do you want that kind of rogue system where we just judge it based on who it is, what it is, how we feel, or do you want a proper system? 0344 499 1000. Our lines are open. Kevin Schofield joins us after the news at 2 o'clock right here on Talk, coming next.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
We got some really cracking calls and comments coming through here this afternoon. We are a number of things we're talking about. Are jury trials under threat? This is Sir Brian Levison. Remember the Levison inquiry, of course? Him, former senior judge, reforming his proposals on reform, scrapping juries for fraud and sex assault cases, leaving judges and magistrates in charge instead. Not all cases, but a chunk of them. Critics warn this undermines justice and risks chaos in an overstretched magistrates' court system. We'll look more at that. Is justice safe under Labour? Lines are open. Also this afternoon, is France finally getting firm on small boats? Emmanuel Macron pledged action to tackle illegal channel crossings, but has blamed Britain's benefit and work system for increasing levels of immigration. He says we need to stop the pull factor. I get it. And resident doctors plan to strike for 5 days despite receiving a 5.4% pay rise from the government. The BMA's demand for a 29.2% pay rise increase has been criticised as unrealistic, with opponents accusing the union of prioritising disruption over patient care during a time of massive strain on the NHS. We'll look more at that as well. 0344 499 1000. John in Lincolnshire says it's not safe to just have judges making decisions. This is used in places like Spain. Look at the Lucy Connolly case. A jury would not have put her behind bars. Well, there was a jury in the Connolly case, wasn't there? So, and they did put her behind bars. Oh, I think what John is saying, in Spain they might not have put her behind bars. Who knows? Anyway, John in Lincolnshire also says, why can't they... Oh, I think I read that one. Why can't they have 3 people on a jury for simpler cases? Spend a week doing multiple cases. That would work, wouldn't it? A kind of conveyor belt system. This is about speeding things up. These new proposals haven't come around because somebody has philosophically found a better way of doing justice. They've come around because someone said, you've got to speed the process up and get rid of the backlog. We'll watch with interest. Joining us, Kevin Schofield, himself a former High Court judge, of course, before he became political editor at HuffPost UK.
Before I went up in the world.
Before you went up in the world, yeah, indeed. Judges or journalists. Interesting. Yeah, I can't see you in a week, to be honest, Kevin.
Well, actually, you say that, but...
If you pulled something off then, that would be extraordinary. Wow, way to go. You've just hot-footed it from Parliament, of course. How was PMQs?
Yeah, it was okay.
Back to normal, by the way, after a few weeks.
Absolutely, yeah. It was Starmer versus Badenoch again. I thought the main takeaway in terms of looking to the future was Keir Starmer was very careful not to rule out freezing income tax thresholds, continuing the freeze on income tax thresholds, which would be a massive U-turn, another big U-turn, because in the budget last year, Rachel Reeves said that she was going to lift them again in 2028-29 in time for the next election. So basically, it's called fiscal drag, and we've probably discussed this before. It means that if you get a pay rise and the threshold stays the same, whereas before it we got with inflation, which tended to make sure that people weren't trapped in a higher tax band. If you freeze it, more people suddenly have to end up paying more tax, and it's a sneaky way for the government to raise several £billion. You know, it's a very
Can
easy...
they get away with that without saying they raise tax?
Well, again, it's one of those ones that the practical impact is that it does raise someone's tax. If suddenly you go from being a 20% tax rate payer to a 40%, then your tax is going to go up. And you've done nothing other than get a pay rise. So, but they would say, well, the rate of tax, the bands haven't gone up, but it's a stealth tax effectively. And it was brought in by the Conservatives, and they froze it. And as I say, last year Rachel Reeves said, it will stay frozen as the Tories plan until 28-29, but after that it will go back to going up with inflation, which is what used to happen. But today he was asked quite clearly by Kemi Badenoch, will you end the freeze in the thresholds, and he wouldn't say he would. Whereas he did say that they wouldn't raise income tax, VAT or national insurance, which was in Labour's manifesto. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting, because that would be a way of kind of achieving maybe not all of the money, but you get a good chunk of it.
You get a good chunk of it back.
And you could still say, I haven't raised income tax,
exactly,
even though you kind of have.
Absolutely have. Well, if you're one of the people who suddenly goes into a higher tax band...
Yeah, I've got a pay rise. How much is it worth? Oh, hang on, nothing.
I've actually lost money. So, you know, it's one of the vagaries of the tax system. And the other thing that Kemi Badenoch asked was about the wealth tax again. There's an awful lot of talk about the wealth tax, whether they're going to bring one in, and he wouldn't rule that out either. Now, I'd still be very surprised if they did it, but the fact that he didn't rule it out, again, just sets that hair running again. But for some reason, Kemi Badenoch, she had another question after it, and she didn't pursue it. So she just kind of left that one.
See, that seems to be a fault of the Conservatives at the moment, and of Badenoch in particular, because to not pursue it, to be that kind of, you know, dog with a bone, that's what you kind of need. I know you can simultaneously waste 6 questions on one thing where it didn't need that. But also, if you're onto something, stick with it, surely.
Absolutely, and I think that's part of the reason why Starmer never appears to be in any great difficulty with her. You know, maybe if she did press home the point a little bit more, really try to drill down into the detail, ask him again and again, then he might seem a little bit discomfited. But again, there was no knockout blow. I feel like I say that every week, but there wasn't.
And there needs to be at this stage of her tenure as the boss of the Tories. She should be knocking. And there's a bit of an open goal there as well. So knockout blows should be coming by the second almost.
Yeah, he's not a popular Prime Minister. He's not got much of a record to defend. There's an awful lot of U-turns that you can criticise him on. But yeah, she doesn't seem to land any blows.
And then Farage stands up and the place goes very quiet because people want to hear his question.
Well, if only. I mean, the thing is, I think it's so counterproductive for Labour MPs to be heckling him and shouting him, because Nigel Farage presents himself as the anti-establishment figure who tells it like it is, whether the establishment likes it or not. So if by merely standing up and opening his mouth, suddenly he's heckled, and it was really loud today, really loud.
Just proves his point.
It proves his point, absolutely. See, there, I'm trying to tell it like it is, and these people are shouting me down because they don't like what I've got to say. And I think that works in his favour, and I just don't understand why the Labour whips don't have a word with their MPs and say, look, Farage is asking a question today, shut your mouths.
Every time you boo and jeer him, his popularity goes up.
Goes up, absolutely. You're just playing into his hands.
You'd think they would know that.
But they do it every single time.
When he did get a question out, immigration, I'm assuming, was the theme.
Yeah, so he tied it in with the Macron visit, basically saying, you've got to stand up to this, I think he called him anti-Brexit, didn't say pompous, kind of arrogant maybe, French president. Clearly no love lost there. There's a slight personal element to this, of course, remember, because Macron hasn't met with Farage while he's here. He has met with the Prime Minister, obviously, Kemi Badenoch, but also Ed Davey, and Reform weren't very happy that he wasn't going to meet
but that's
Nigel
normal
Farage as well.
I mean,
he can't meet everyone. No. And although they're ahead in the polls, they do only have, I almost said 5 MPs, it's back to 4 again.
That's
so
true.
They are a small party. As far as I'm aware, he wasn't meeting anyone from the SNP, who have many more MPs than Reform. So, as I say, there's a personal element there. And he was basically saying to Starmer, hang tough, don't be fobbed off by the French. They've got to basically play their part in trying to stop the small boats as well.
Let's move to the big story here, which is, I mean, I don't know how political parties are going to divvy this up in terms of their own positions, but these court reforms, fewer jury trials, recommended to prevent essentially a total collapse of the system. Brian Levison, in charge of this, wants to reduce the 76,957 case Crown Court backlog, reserving juries for the more serious cases. Now, as I said at the beginning, this isn't being arrived on because they found a better way of doing justice. This has happened because they've got to get an 77,000 backlog down.
Yeah, basically, and it's kind of classic British system, is that we wait until something is about to break before we actually think about trying to fix it. This is something, obviously, that hasn't just happened overnight. This has been building up for a very long
100%.
time. And they're only now finally getting around to trying to fix it. But in doing so, it's, attacking really one of the fundamental aspects of the justice system and freedom of personal freedom in a way, because surely you are entitled, if you're charged with a serious offence, you should be entitled to being tried in front of a jury of your peers. And then once you start picking away at these freedoms and these rights that people have, it's very difficult to give them back.
I remember talking to somebody years ago as a guest on the show who was saying that there was some kind of fraud trial, and it went on for about 9 months, and it was so complicated that the lawyers were struggling to keep up with it. It was like they all pretty much did a PhD in international economics to try and get to this, and the tax rules and the bits of VAT from one region to a... It was ridiculous. And this guy was saying, there's no way a jury should have sat and listened to that, because there's no way you can authentically and reliably arrive at a verdict. Now, I understand that, but that's a different argument to this. That's about different. Certain cases may just be... It's probably just futile. You might get a juror that's a bit savvy with numbers, loves a bit of countdown, so would probably be good on a fraud trial. I don't know. But with this, when you're talking about people who are accused of offences that are quite serious, they might say, well, hang on, if there was a jury here, because I haven't done it, then I think I stand a better chance of having my case heard.
Absolutely.
Whereas 3 old duffers sitting in a room having a chinwag over what they might think doesn't quite sound like justice.
No, it doesn't. And part of the reason for the jury system is it's a cross-section of society, different, people with different economic, racial, whatever backgrounds, and they bring their own different perspectives to it, which in theory should allow you to come up with hopefully the right verdict, and you can maybe relate more easily to the person in the dock and to the victims, etc., etc. Whereas judges, just by their very nature, are fairly out of touch, probably not representative of the people in the dock or the victims, and as I say, you start to chip away at the real fundamentals of the criminal justice system.
It's quite funny that the other thing that's happened with, and this is sort of our friend social media, I suppose, the perception of judges, these were probably all kind of, secret Tories with a, nice landowning kind of character, always got a lovely place in the Cotswolds.
And then at the weekend.
Nice pad in Cheshire or something, 10,000 acres.
Stay at their club during the week.
But according to social media, they're all mad lefties. How did that happen?
I've honestly got no idea.
How did our judges go from being that to sort of Arthur Scargill with a wig?
I think you're right. You've hit the nail on the head. It's social media, isn't it? People are always looking for some sort of conspiracy. There's some. Clearly they think that because they're woke. But if the verdict or the Lucy Corner case you mentioned earlier, that's become a bit of a cause célèbre on the right, hasn't it? Because of the sentence that was handed down. But yeah, you're right. For long enough, everyone thought about judges. Well, they didn't know who the Rolling Stones were, or
that's right. It was all of that.
They were so out of touch. They were just duffers. They didn't have a clue
music by Mick Jagger.
Yeah, exactly. A popular beat combo, my lord. So they didn't, have a clue about real life. There was no suggestion that they were all raving communists.
No, that's bizarre, isn't it?
Quite an unusual shift.
It's funny, I was having a conversation with 2 police officers just last week about the Lucy Connolly case, and one of them said, which surprised me, somebody must have had a word with the judiciary on this to get 31 months for something that it wouldn't make a courtroom, half an hour ago. But the other copper, who was like quite incandescent, they said, "What are you talking about? Seriously? You really think that like a bloke in..." I mean, this happened under David Cameron during the riots in 2011, so it's not a Starmer thing particularly.
No.
But his name does rhyme with 2-tier. That's quite useful. As I think we said the other day, in the same way that Thatcher rhymed with Snatcher, so it was good for the milk story. So maybe there's a bit of that going on. But the other couple was going, no, that wouldn't have happened. They were just jailed because it was against the backdrop of public disorder. That's what happens during that time. A judge doesn't listen to they almost look down on politicians. They don't want to hear from any character. But when you see cases that are quite obviously unusual, it does draw you there a little bit. You do wonder.
It does a little bit, but I mean, I guess at the end of the day, they are human like everyone else, and they may well have. I'm not suggesting for a second, and I don't believe that politicians would have a word in their ear and say, like, you've got to start handing some exemplary sentences here to send out a message. I think this may be the judges, despite what we just said about them being out of touch, are aware of the social discussion around the riots back then and the riots last summer, and think, right, well, maybe we should be a little bit tougher here. Maybe that's how it came about.
Let's move to this story. Keir Starmer's government sinks to its lowest ever approval rating. They've only been there a year, Kevin.
Yeah, it's been pretty staggering, really. I mean, you've got to remember, he wasn't carried shoulder high on a sedan chair up Downing Street.
Wasn't Blair, was it?
No, it was less than 35% of the vote. And just because of where the votes were distributed, he ended up with this almost accidental massive majority, which does not in any way reflect the public enthusiasm that there was. I think people just desperately wanted rid of the Tories. Labour were the best alternative. So in that regard, it's maybe not that surprising, but they've not made it easy for themselves, to put it mildly, by making so many mistakes. Winter fuel obviously being the original sin, and it's never got much better for them since then. And the U-turns haven't helped on various things, and it's been a tough 12 months. And although the next election probably isn't for another 3.5, 4 years, they've really got to get their finger out pretty
100%.
quickly.
63%, in another poll, 63% of the public believe Starmer does not respect them, which is not a good, it's a horrible thing, the thought that your Prime Minister doesn't respect the people who vote for him. Considering he made great play about, you know, country first, party second, that seems to be a big mantra of his.
Absolutely, yeah. I think people just, for whatever reason, just have never quite taken to him.
Yeah.
And someone said, I think a poster said, that people tend to like politicians who seem to be enjoying themselves, who seem to actually enjoy the job.
Yeah.
Farage, Boris,
yeah.
You know, these people who maybe have a bit of a laugh, just seem to be comfortable in their own skin.
Yes.
Cameron as well was, you know, he was pretty, he wasn't like Boris obviously, but he was relaxed, he looked the part, he acted the part, and he won a couple of elections. Obviously it went bad after the referendum, but Starmer never looks terribly comfortable, does he? I think people pick up on that.
Yeah. Final one here. Councils. Give councils more powers to raise taxes. According to Angela Rayner, she supports fiscal devolution. This would allow councils and mayors to levy local taxes and manage their own budgets. There's a lot of pressure, obviously, on councils from up high.
Yeah.
So they've got X amount of money to play with, but they could be raising their own, other than their council tax.
And you give politicians the opportunity to raise tax and have more money to spend, then they will take it.
100%.
And they've got a lot of things they have to spend it on: social care, police, a lot of the fire, lots of local services. But people, I think, feel that they've been taxed enough, and it'd be a very brave politician, I think, that went into an election saying, "Vote for me, and I'll put your taxes up."
That's the problem, isn't it?
That is the problem.
That is the problem. Which is always the problem that the Conservatives have generally had, not on specifically on taxes, but, you know, bearing in mind their whole thing is to conserve and retain the status quo. It's that their ongoing mantra over the years has been, you know, vote for us, we will do nothing. We will keep everything exactly as it is. Because that's how we like it.
Yeah, well, people don't like chaos, do they? People tend to be a little bit suspicious of revolution, and people... change is a good thing. If you're fed up with the government, change is a powerful message, but people don't want somebody to come in and absolutely rip things. They want things to be calm and measured.
Correct.
They don't like chaos.
Listen, Kevin, we hit the clock, but thank you, as ever. Kevin Schofield, he is political editor at HuffPost UK. Thank you to him. Back to you. We'll talk to Steve in Leeds next on Talk.
Breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a Talk exclusive we've been looking at. I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, do these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And just to correct something, somebody mentioned about Lucy Connolly not having a jury trial, and I said I'm sure she did. That's correct, she didn't have a jury trial, but that's because she pled guilty, not because she wasn't entitled to one, if that makes sense. So that would be the reason. Anna makes this point as well, many others too. Lucy Connolly did have a jury trial because she pleaded guilty. The judge then sentenced her further, even if she had not pled and she'd had a jury trial. If found guilty, the judge would have still handed down the sentence. Juries do not sentence. And that's a very good point on the specifics of the sentence. Another good one here from David in Sussex. Little known fact about trial by jury: not only is the jury there to decide on the guilt of the defendant, they're also there to judge if the legislation is just. And I assume, David, you mean the legislation, that the mechanism of the law that's being applied as distinct from the evidence. They're there to decide if the legislation is just. A jury can find a defendant not guilty if the legislation is deemed unfair. This is called annulment by jury. Jurors can annul legislation. It is true power of the people, true democracy, and a protection against any government tyranny. Think about all the legislation we can annul via trial by jury, says David in Sussex. It's a good point. I'd be interested to know how often that happens. So would that be called a technicality? In layman's terms, David, I don't know. And one would assume that the jury would have to be directed to the legislation being unjust by by a defending solicitor. One would have further thought, based on what David is telling us, that the judge would be aware of that as well, that would collapse the trial because the legislation you're trying to prosecute the client on is either the wrong legislation, or it's not fit for purpose, or it doesn't apply to that particular blur. David, thank you very much indeed for that. Steve's in Leeds. What have you got for us, Steve? Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah,
Hi.
just a couple of quick points on this jury trial thing. So the first one's really quick. We have 12 people in a jury because of the Bible. But what it leads to in some cases is trials collapsing because they can't make a decision.
Mm-hmm.
So first, make it 11. Then you're always going to have either, like they have in America, a majority jury or not. You're either guilty or you're innocent by 6 to 5, whatever. Yeah, that's the first thing. Second thing is the problem with the court system is the same problem we've got in the NHS. It's based on the old-fashioned professions, and professionals don't work weekends or shifts.
Yeah.
That's a working class thing. So that's why you can't get a chief constable on a weekend, or a senior civil servant, or a consultant to do an operation. And it's why the courts will never work nights or weekends. Because these professionals say, hold on, I'm a professional, I'm not a pleb. You working class people like your basic coppers and your nurses, you can work shifts.
Yep.
But we live in a 24-hour-a-day world now. It's not like the Victorian days when everybody across the world went away on the weekend.
How have they...
Nothing happened.
Yeah, and we've lived in a 24-hour world for about 20 years as well, just to make it more mysterious.
Yeah. It's why you can't get a GP's appointment.
Yeah.
GPs don't work weekends.
Nobody
Because
works
in
at
the Victorian days,
Yeah.
nobody died on a weekend, nobody set out on fire on a weekend, or certainly not rich people, so guess what? We don't need to be there.
It's weird. I went to... my partner had a hospital appointment on a Saturday morning. And so there are some clinics, that do a sort of 9 till 1, like X-ray, scanny sort of things, which maybe they never used to do. But it was remarkable, Steve, walking into a massive hospital to see it almost dead. There was yes, of course there were some clinics, but not most of them. There was no one there, and I thought, how can that be? Did people stop getting ill at weekends?
Yep. I spent 6 weeks in hospital a few years back with cancer, right? And I could see the consultants up to 5 o'clock on a Friday, but if anything happened after that, it was wait till Monday. So I was in hospital for 12 days longer than I needed to be, because it was always you've got to wait. Because
there was no one to give the full check.
System. You rob somebody on a Friday night, it's Monday before you see the magistrate.
100%.
So you're in the cells for 2 more days than you need to be for the magistrate to say, here's a fine.
When you put it like that, I mean, it's absolutely true. Surely that would be your starting point, along with getting rid of, or putting speeding tickets to the back of the queue, maybe as a suggestion. Steve, thank you. It's a great call. Robert says, I've served on juries, 2 cases I heard. What worried me was how dim some of my fellow jurors were. Yeah, I guess you've got to take the good with the bad. Sexist remark that the woman seemed to think he looked nice, therefore he was innocent. In both cases, they were found guilty. 3 years armed robbery and 2 year theft. 2 years theft to order. Interesting experience, though, says Robert. Yeah, I can only imagine that in those jury systems, you're going to come across people and go, how the heck did you can hardly write your name, mate. What are you doing here? But that's democracy. That's justice. Richard, down in London, what have you got for us, Richard?
Hey, Ian, good to talk to you again.
You too.
I think one of the problems here is that, actually, the big problem here, I think, is that we have a government, to use a quote from Lord Hailsham, we have an elective dictatorship. And on the other hand, we have a situation where they're dealing with problems that are actually unmanageable. Let's just 2 quick examples. The report into Southport is presumably going to say that we need to spend more resources on prevent because this person was missed, we spend every day talking about how the government has run out of money, so there's not going to be any more money for any more resources in Southport or for prevent, Ian. And of course, the politicians are also saying, we've got to spend more money on defence.
Yeah.
So we have an unmanageable problem in Southport. We've got the same thing with the rape gangs. Do you seriously think that the rape gangs inquiry is going to say, I'll tell you what, let's have a lot more social workers, and let's get social workers to talk to kids at school, and let's get the police and the security forces to go after the gangs? Of course not. Ian, what they're going to say is something like, well, of course, it's very sad. But we have a situation where we have, and I think what's really sad is that people. A man died yesterday, Lord Tebbit, who said, basically 30 years ago, that a multicultural society would be a divided society, and you will have these problems. And of course, it's become almost impossible to say this sort of thing. But once again, it's been proved right. But these problems, we're dealing with problems that are basically unmanageable, and they're not just about multiculturalism, but the problem with crime is simply that it's out of control. If you look at a fare dodging on the tube, I mean, it's completely, it's every day, it's every 10 minutes. No one does anything.
No.
And it's the same with shoplifting. And yet we have a government who said last year, we're going to try and renew the country. I mean, this is gaslighting. I mean, it's gaslighting. I mean, these people, I suppose Labour would do gaslighting with renewable energy. But, I mean...
There'll be no fossil fuels involved, that's for sure.
What we have essentially here is a number of problems that are completely unmanageable. There is simply too much crime. The only way in which you could deal with it, I think, would be to take an American zero tolerance style approach. And yes, have the money, find the money to build another 20 or 30,000 prison spaces, and send the most violent people to prison. And Ian, for longer, so that they don't come out and reoffend. But we have somebody in 10 Downing Street who has spent his entire professional life saying prison doesn't work and we must reform this. And he's one of the people that doesn't really believe in prison. Ian.
That's true.
Unless somebody says something racist, in which case
it's big prison time.
Yes.
Loves it for that.
I think the other thing is, sorry to go on, but I think they're taking advantage of the fact that we have, we don't have people like Margaret Thatcher or Norman Tebbit leading the Conservatives. The Conservatives are weaker than ever. I don't know. Now that Rupert said reform, I don't really know. I mean, they don't seem to have any ideas. And it's almost as though we really do have an elected dictatorship.
But we are talking about we're talking about like many years of decline and decay, aren't we? So putting all this back together is not just massively expensive, it's hugely time consuming. It's like turning an oil tanker around to get back to where we want to be. Could take another 10 years at least.
But they could find the money last week apparently for another 200 health centres. So if they can build another 200 health centres,
I agree. I refuse to believe that there isn't a way of doing this that can be affordable or doable at least. And as you rightly say, build a load of prisons, get them done quickly as well. Not take 5 years, take 5 months and do it. Listen, great call. Thank you very much indeed for that, Richard, down in London. One here from Anonymous, as you will understand. As of Tuesday this week, going through a trial as a victim of rape and sexual assault. This has taken 9 years to be in court. The mistakes by the police and the judicial services over those years have been destroying not only for me, but the witness's family and friends. And I am so deeply sorry to hear that. I can't imagine the distress and the difficulty, particularly as the victim of this. In addition, everything surrounding the case, as this texter points out, witnesses, family, friends. Then there's the other issue of evidence either being forgotten or not necessarily contaminated, but just recollection. Yes, you made a statement at the time, and I'm talking about witnesses here, but will you be as sharp when you arrive in the... There's all of that. Like, justice delayed is justice denied is the phrase that I think Leveson made, not for the first time, but it's true. And they're the kind of cases where you see the greatest danger. Cases of that magnitude, where it is rape, sexual assault, murder, these kind of cases are severely damaged by delay, severely damaged for all the obvious reasons, not least, in fact, first and foremost, the disposition of the victim, which has to be at the forefront of everything. But in a case like that, 9 years, that's almost back of the queue territory for someone who's experienced the greatest of trauma. Thank you for that message. 0344 499 1000. We're going to chat to Ben Habib in just a couple of moments. Get his take on Monsieur Macron. He's been speaking to Parliament. He's going to be meeting the Prime Minister. What else has he got up his sleeve? Let's get Ben's take on that next.